All right, welcome to the Max Effort Kitchen podcast. This is a For the Love of Food episode. I am Matt. This is Sarah. We are your hosts for today. Sarah, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Got the energy up. Really excited. I've been fully immersed in this podcast topic for weeks. I might have gone overboard, but overboard in the best way, in a fun way.
Overboard in the best way. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
I can appreciate going overboard on things that spark the passion, I guess you could say. So before we get into that amazing subject, which we will go all down the roads of cinnamon, let's talk about how your contest is going. Give us an update.
It's going pretty good. Right now we're in the top 10 for our group. I'm currently in third place. In about 2 weeks, it's going to be narrowed down to the first place participants, and then all of those people will be funneled together into one group for the last few rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the critics pick, which is a really fun thing for everybody who makes it that far. Basically, you get a baking prompt, and then you make a baked goods, and whoever does it the best gets a critic pick and gets featured in the magazine also. And so yeah, that's pretty cool.
Heck yeah, that's fantastic. So you made it into top 20.
I'm top 10 at this point.
Top 10. Look at that. So that's going to get you through some rounds. So everybody get out there and definitely check out what Sarah's doing. Go vote. It's free. You vote daily, and that's all there is to it. It's just like it takes nothing. I guess it does take a Facebook deal, right? It takes a Facebook membership or a profile, right?
Yeah, it takes Facebook, and I think you can do it without Facebook, but I haven't really explored it too much. But yeah, it's definitely more voter friendly if you have a Facebook account.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you have time, please vote. Do it for the baked goods. I will be making some very yummy treats if I win, and I will be sharing those yummy treats. So
I love it. And if you want to make sure she does share those, reach out to her on her Instagram, which is
Sarah Soares Chef. And
Excellent.
I will send you baked goods if I win. I will. Don't trust me. I will.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So it's been life has been very interesting for me. I'm about ready to. If there's a mess behind me, like I'm really irritated about the way my prep table looks back there. But the reason why it looks like that is because I am hopefully, fingers crossed, we've went out and found a home that has an amazing kitchen, and we're going after it. So big things to come with that. Hopefully, I mean, it has the room for a whole brand new podcast studio. That I'm very excited about. One of the things that I've been doing, I mean, I started this podcast in this garage, and it's all good and fine, right? Until it gets 13 degrees outside, or until it gets 115 degrees outside. You're just a part of the element, and so I'm very excited about getting that part on an indoor. I've already ordered some good lighting, just have a little bit more of a professional studio, which I'm very excited about. And hopefully it means I can have shows where people can actually come to the studio and we do it together. I know, Sarah, you and I have always talked about doing a show where we cook.
That is the dream right there. Like,
right.
I'm so stoked. I think about it all the time.
And I think we will. And the beautiful part about that on the other side of this is that the kitchen in this home is massive and will be a perfect area for us to do that in. So a lot of fun things to come with the For the Love of Food show that I think that you all are going to like. So if you are a avid fan, and I would just say be prepared, because we're going to make some changes, and they're going to be all good changes. So that's a fun thing. Sarah, how's work going? How's life going? I know that you've been very much you've been taking some cooking classes. You've been diving into the world of cinnamon. You said, I think last night you told me you're going into chocolate, which is a whole ball of wax, and no pun intended. But how's life going otherwise?
It's going pretty good, trying a lot of new things, staying busy. It's been a blast, a crazy blast, but it's been a blast.
I like it. That's good
but,
stuff.
I mean, that's the best way to live, right?
Yeah, I think so. Enjoy your life, and that's really all that matters. Um, cool. Well, let's jump right into cinnamon, and let's talk about this. Now, I'm going to kind of hand the mic over to you and just let you take it away. We'll start with kind of the history of cinnamon. So, talk about what you found out, the cool parts about that, and let's hear it.
Okay, so for starters, I want to list the four main types of cinnamon that's used like in the culinary scene. In the cinnamon genus itself, there's around 250 species, but only a very few of them are used for cooking and stuff. There's a couple more besides these main four, but those are like very small scale. Like I'm talking like maybe like 100 square miles where they're actually produced and used.
So, where is it all centralized?
Oh, okay. So this is the thing about cinnamon. It's mostly in like the Eurasia continent is where
Hmm.
most cinnamon, has been historically like originates from.
Yeah.
The thing about cinnamon is it's very hard to track, and I'll get into that in a second because there's a
Okay.
lot behind it, a lot of confusing verbiage, and cinnamon has been an important part of history since like remote antiquity and even before remote antiquity, so we don't really have a full scale picture on it, which is
Yeah.
interesting because like with most things, like as I'm starting to look into chocolate, there is like a genetic trail that we are able to follow, but with
Right. Right.
cinnamon there's so much social and like economic confusion around it that it's like this whole gray area. So until like the 16th century, it's actually incredibly difficult to track.
Interesting. I wonder why that is. Did it go into the idea or why that it was so hard to track, or was it is it just a good question mark and nobody really looked into it?
Oh, I have a story for you.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So, as I was saying, there are four main types of cinnamon.
Okay.
There's cinnamon cassia, Chinese cinnamon.
Yep.
There is ooh, names, all the
Hmm.
names. I have way too many notes, don't ask. There's Corrientes cinnamon from Indonesia. There
Yep.
is Saigon cinnamon from Vietnam, and then there is Ceylon cinnamon from Sri Lanka.
So
Now,
those are the four main.
those are the four main. And I was doing a
Okay.
lot of research and like other names came up. And from what I've seen is that they're like almost a split off, like a very, very similar variation with like a slight change in like the genome of like the cinnamon species from one of these main types, like a very similar region, like maybe like even like a few hundred miles away, and they just slightly evolved differently, and
Right.
they ended up having like a different name, but they can also be viewed, encompassed in the same type. So it's like I said, it's incredibly interesting.
Okay.
Now, out of all of these four main types, three of them are not actually considered cinnamon.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
And that is because they're actually a similar spice that also comes from the bark of the underbark of a tree. Oh, by the way, cinnamon is tree bark. It's an
Hmm.
underlayer of a soft layer of the bark of tree from a specific evergreen species.
Right.
But anyway, they also come from the bark of the tree, but they taste completely different, and their chemical formula is
Hmm.
distinct from true cinnamon. But they have been historically way cheaper to produce because of the way they're harvested. To make Ceylon cinnamon, which is true cinnamon, a lot more manual labor goes into it. I'll get into all of that later because I was doing tons of
So
research on that end, and it's really
yes. Well,
crazy.
let me understand if I understand you correctly. What you're telling me is that the cinnamon we're buying in the stores probably is not real cinnamon.
Probably not real cinnamon. Y'all
gotta
have
love
been
gotta love that.
bamboozled for most of your life.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I what was it? It was probably about 10 years ago. I got a Christmas gift from somebody that knew I was into food and all that, and it was a box, and this box had all the different varieties of cinnamon as you just said. And so I was like, I got really interested about that, and I started looking into it, and these were all the real cinnamons, and that's where I kind of learned that as well. And I'm glad you touched into that, is that the cinnamon we're buying in the stores is not actual cinnamon. Did it go into in your research, did you find out like Is it mace? Is it what is it if it's not cinnamon?
So it's actually like a distant cousin of cinnamon itself.
Okay.
It comes from like a similar evergreen species. The biggest thing that's distinct is that they have a much different variety of the three main compounds that give cinnamon its distinct, flavors.
Okay.
And, its flavors, I'm spacing the name, its characteristics.
Okay.
There is cinnamaldehyde, which is a flavonoid that makes up the flavor and aroma of cinnamon.
Okay.
There's cinnamic acid, an acid found in cinnamon that has different antibacterial and health benefiting properties. And then what was the last one? Oh, and then of course we have volatile oil or essential oil, an oil found in all spices that gives it more of its characteristic flavor.
Correct.
So all three of these things vary greatly in cinnamon versus cassia. The other main distinction is the way they are harvested. Like I was saying earlier, so cinnamon, traditional Ceylon cinnamon comes out in layers, in rolls. It's still spirals, like when you think of cassia, but it's very delicate, almost looks like a scroll. It's a lot softer, and it takes like hundreds of man hours to produce like a substantial amount of Ceylon cinnamon. But with cassia, you go in, you strip the tree. It might take 5 minutes to get like a piece with a skilled laborer.
Yeah. So and that's why that's most likely why when we're buying cinnamon in the store that you're not getting the real thing because of the amount of labor it's taking.
Yeah, it's one of
the how hard it is to harvest it. And I mean, we've all seen cinnamon sticks, right?
Yeah.
They're curled up and you're always like, how did they get it all curled like that? And you stick it in some water, some tea or some coffee. I used to work with a group of people that would always, they would, whenever they made their coffee, they would make it on the stovetop. And it's interesting because it was an instant coffee, and it was like they put the instant coffee in the pot, they put the water, they put a bunch of cinnamon, a couple like cloves and some lemon in there. And it was some of the best coffee I've ever had, and really distinctly because of the cinnamon, I'm pretty sure. But
the lemon is interesting too. Was it just like a whole lemon slice, or was it like the peel?
It was a whole lemon slice. They just threw a lemon slice in there. Yeah. And so it gave it a very nice balance because, coffee is already acidic. But what instant coffee is not is acidic. And so what they're doing is they were reinserting the acidic flavor, which makes coffee the way, so great and makes us want to have more of it, right? That acid makes our mouth salivate and almost makes us hungry.
Yeah, so, wakes up a bit.
Yeah. So that's kind of the idea behind the lemon. But, but when I think about that coffee, I think of cinnamon. And I don't know, cinnamon has a very distinct attachment to a lot of holiday things, right? A lot of baking, but go back to where you were and talk about where the harvest and all that stuff.
So, with cinnamon in general, it's actually really interesting because the cinnamon field in Sri Lanka, like Ceylon cinnamon, its production field is shrinking as they move away from manual labor into more of an economy focused around like office jobs.
Yeah.
So, and the thing about like Ceylon cinnamon is it's such a skilled, specific, like niche set of labor that the knowledge is passed down generationally. And it's knowledge that's on the verge of being lost because there's only a handful of true skilled laborers left that have spent decades perfecting the craft of cinnamon production.
Okay. So that's really cool. And a little scary because we don't want that to go away, obviously. And I'm sure that the skilled laborers will figure out a way, but I didn't know that about cinnamon. I got to be honest with you. That was really cool.
I have a whole article. I should send it to you because it is fascinating.
Interesting.
I just read through the whole thing and it was just absolutely mind-boggling. I think it was the favorite part of research I did this whole.
That's really nice. Great. Good work. So let's go into sort of some modern day cinnamon stuff. You talked a little bit about the history. So, I mean, it's all still being harvested the same way, correct? I mean, that's pretty much what you just told us.
Well, I didn't look too much into the harvesting of cassia. Besides, I know the way that's
Okay.
like cotton strips. There might be, because cassia is like, it's such a monopoly over the cinnamon market currently.
Correct. Yeah.
Like even like most of the Ceylon cinnamon you get on the shelves, it's illegally mixed with cassia to buffer the price,
When you
unfortunately.
say illegally, why are you saying illegally?
Because it's really hard to measure it, but a scientific study did um took quote Ceylon cinnamon and measured the amount of like cinnamaldehyde and all these specific compounds in it,
Hmm.
especially
Hmm.
curcumin, which is the main toxic component of
Yep.
cinnamon, which has much higher concentration levels in cassia than it is cinnamon. Cinnamon has about like much. And they found that the test results they got back were too skewed. So it was very likely that most of these Ceylon cinnamon brands were mixing in cassia to buffer it, even though that is against the law in most places.
See that, and that's interesting. Like I've always wondered. I don't know if you've ever had this thought in your head, but like there are a lot of laws based around our food, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the logical feeling behind that is that these laws are there to protect us, to make sure we're not putting toxic stuff in our body. Although some might have an opinion on that one, but we won't go into that route. But really, the laws are based off of trade,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, they're based off because these are all coming from, you know, across overseas, and this is a very highly traded thing. It is in the spice trade. It's, I mean, did it talk anything about the spice trade? Like, did you get any information on that?
Oh yeah, I actually even started touching on the history. Yeah, I've just been laying the background work to get you thinking. I have
Yes.
like 5 timelines laid out in this notebook right here. Yeah.
I like it. So
Oh,
let's go into a little bit of the trade. See, let's talk about that because I think that's pretty an interesting part of the life of cinnamon.
so the first ever written records of cinnamon use was about 5,000 years ago in
Yeah.
like 3000 BCE. And the interesting thing, I'm just going to mention like BCE, is it goes backwards. So like 3000 is like, it counts down from 3000 to 1. And then once you hit 1, that is when AC
Yeah.
begins. And then
Yes.
we go up to like present time. So
Correct.
like before 3000 like BC, there wasn't like, I don't think, I wasn't looking into it too heavily, but like that's like when like written records like just first started occurring.
Correct.
So just to lay out a timeline for y'all.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Anyway, in the Pharaohic era, they used, quote, cinnamon in embalming practices in mummifications because of its cinnamic acid and its preservation and antibacterial processes. Although, upon reflection, the digger I dug found out that this was actually not cinnamon. It was confusion by the spice trade in particular, cross-calling like cinnamon cassia and cassia cinnamon in order to, create more capital overall. And
Right.
we see this a lot in the spice trade, the cross reference of the two, because
Hmm.
everything was word of mouth. And there was like a lot of secrets kept around spices in general
Yeah.
for the purposes of monopolizing all of these different ingredients.
Mm.
So the cinnamon used in the Pharaohic area was actually most likely cassia that came down from China, the Chinese cassia variation. And the Chinese cassia actually does have the highest amount of cinnamic acid, so it makes the most sense for embalming in general. Side note, not super relevant to the story, but I just thought that it was really, really interesting, so I had to put
Yeah. No, I like that. I mean, I don't think I'll ever need to mummify somebody, but maybe if you're like you're mummifying your cat that passed. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But it's like that, but it is a really cool thing, and it's cool to know that cinnamon is out there for more than just one use.
The thing that I want to play around with is I wonder if there's a way to extract cinnamic acid in using it in like culinary use.
Hmm.
Like That would be really interesting if you're able to like, figure out how to do that, if it would even be safe to use on its own in its pure form. But
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess the essential oil part of that would
yeah.
be something similar, but maybe not the exact. Yeah, that's interesting.
So anyway, after the Pharaohic era, let's see, it was used, like brought up in like a lot of texts, but it was still a mystery. Of course, there wasn't as much diffusion of cinnamon at this time. We didn't really start getting a lot of like historic texts until like, 500 BC, where it especially came up like in a lot of like Greek writing and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, and this is when like tons of legends about cinnamon ran rampant, and it's
Okay.
really really interesting because we're seeing like a lot of Greek, like famous Greek philosophers and like poets and like famous Greek philosophers and poets and all like the educated population
Right.
mentioning cinnamon and about how it was derived from, I believe, Arabia. And
Uh-huh.
there were legends of it being guarded by dragons and winged serpents, and of there being giant cinnamon forests where giant birds would collect these cinnamon sticks to build their nests, and that is how cinnamon was cultivated.
This sounds like a like an interlude to Lord of the Rings.
Right?
Yeah, like I think of big giant eagles, and like the dragons, and yeah, no, that's I love that. That's
It
awesome.
was so interesting. And this was like around 500, 400 BC.
Okay.
Now Pliny the Elder, who was I believe he was a Roman writer, he in about like 30 BC, was all like, wait a second, guys, this doesn't make sense. It was most likely the people of the spice trade creating these legends in order to upsell prices. And that's when
Uh,
everyone went, oh, wait a minute. But
yeah.
what's really interesting, I forget where I have it in my notes, but there was one part of the world, I forget where, but they had been holding on to these legends until like, I think like the 17th, 18th century, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then like the news got more widespread. So like it's just really interesting to see the effects of these legends and the way it passes from generation and views, like, it informs people's view of
Right.
food and culture and spice and all this stuff.
Right. No, and I like that because um the history of anything really has to do with I guess a weird comparison in my brain how it works is like, okay, this is your family history, this is your genetic makeup, this is how we tell the stories about you. I mean, if you could do that as a person, but we're doing it towards a spice, which I find is very interesting, that something um, this big in the world of culinary has a massive story and massive genealogy about where it came from. I
The
mean,
way, like, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead. You got it.
Every single food, even foods that we no longer like use and think of, have had such a big historic impact, and it's beautiful to track and see what it meant in people's lives. And you can apply this to anything. Ancient wheat varieties,
Right.
the ancestors of the mandarin orange. There's so many stories, and it's just a beautiful way to look at life through the history of food. And that's what draws me about it. Like, this is why I research like Pharaohic embalming, because it gives you a window into what these spices that we now have and use today meant to all of these past generations. And I just think that's really really cool.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the evolution of it. How maybe it didn't start out as a culinary use or a use in our food. It started out as a use for a way of life, a way to preserve, maybe the people that passed that are important to us. They would mummify it. It was a tradition. I'm guessing. I don't know too much about the Egyptian culture, but I'm guessing that was something they did to honor the death. And it's really neat how it can go from that to what we know cinnamon today. I'm over here talking about putting cinnamon in coffee, so it's like the vast amount of space in between those two things tells me that this is a very intriguing subject, and obviously we're not going to hit it in 45 minutes, but we're doing our best here. So, all right, Sarah, move forward. Where are we going next with cinnamon?
Okay, let's see. Okay. I have so many notes. I'm kind of problematic with this.
How about medicinal use? Are there any areas for medicinal use with cinnamon?
Historically, cinnamon has definitely been used for medicinal use.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend using any cassia varieties because especially the curcumin content is too high. You can still completely consume cassia safely. I mean, it'd only be a problem if you were like having a tablespoon or over on a regular basis. And like the lethal amount of cassia is 15 cups at once. So I think you're pretty good.
If you're listening to this, we are not giving you any ideas here. So understand that. Have you, okay, so this is completely side, kind of off the topic, side note with cinnamon. Have you ever done the cinnamon challenge?
Oh, no. No.
Do you know what challenge I'm talking about?
Yeah, isn't it where you like swallow cinnamon whole?
Yeah, it's like you take, it's just like I guess a tablespoon or just a spoon, normal spoon that you have at your home, and a spoonful of cinnamon. I have tried it, and I was very, very unsuccessful with it. And it was one of the worst things I have ever done in my life. And I've also done the saltine challenge, which that wasn't as bad. But you will really get an understanding of this spice and what the effects, the massive strength that it has by doing that, because it is not anything to be messed with. I was hurting for days. Let's just put it that way. Okay. We'll get off of that. So as far as medicinal use, you're saying the cassia is probably not the best way to go. But I have one question for you, and I don't know if this you found this in your notes or your research, but I'm going to the grocery store, I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm like, I want to get real cinnamon. How can I tell what was real cinnamon and what is not on the modern day? Did it go through that?
Okay, so there's a few specific characteristics because, like I said, true cinnamon is pretty distinct. Like all of the cassia varieties, really hard to confuse. Like you'd have to have a very sensitive palate, I feel, to really pick up on the nuances. Okay. But true Ceylon cinnamon stands like alone. Like it's going to be a lot lighter in color. Like if you get like the full spirals, which probably aren't as readily available, it's mostly going to be ground. It's like light in color. It's softer. Like you could grind it up into powder form in like a coffee grinder, for instance. Okay. It's going to be like it's going to be more shaved and spiraled. It's going to look like a scroll. The biggest thing to tell is taste and smell. It's going to smell kind of citrusy. It's going to and taste too. It's going to be like a little bit spiced, but definitely like it has those notes of citrus, like orange peel at the end. It's going to really stand out to you. Now, and it's going to go by the name of Ceylon cinnamon. It's going to be very difficult to be 100% certain that it hasn't been mixed in with cassia at some point because we don't have enough legislation in place to really be on top of it. Like there isn't like a lot of practices to like certify the purity of Ceylon cinnamon, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just did a quick little Google search and I found that there are two places that I know fairly well that sell the Ceylon cinnamon. One of them readily accessible to pretty much anyone in the world, which is Amazon. You can get it off Amazon. Now, may basically follow the trail back, make sure you're getting it right. But they do sell varieties of Ceylon cinnamon, but also Whole Foods sells an organic Ceylon cinnamon powder.
A lot of health food stores do, yeah. Anything that's a health store will probably have it because people do take Ceylon cinnamon for health benefits. I personally would not recommend it just because it may have been mixed with cassia.
Okay.
And you might be getting too high of a curcumin amount just because of that. So
Interesting.
it does
All
have
right.
antioxidant properties. It's really good for your heart. It's really good for your blood sugar, your bloodstream. It's there's been studies that shown that it helps helps mitigate like diabetes symptoms.
Okay.
But curcumin is very hard on people's hearts in
Okay.
general.
Okay.
So I would definitely not recommend trying to take like a lot of it supplementally. But having it in your diet, even like cassia, is completely fine and completely good, and they do both have health sustaining properties. But if you're taking it like especially in pill form, I would not recommend that, just in case it was mixed in with cassia. So
I
PSA
see.
from
Okay.
Steph.
I just found a really cool picture. I'm going to send it to you. And it shows the difference between basically real and fake cinnamon sticks. And it's exactly what she said. It's like the real has this almost like looks like rolled paper look to it. And then the fake looks like it's actual bark. Um, and so it's an interesting picture because it really gives a good picture into what you were talking about the way they harvest it and how delicate it actually is and how real it looks. That's interesting. So what you're saying is that basically to get the real stuff, I mean, it's going to be probably a pretty hard place to find, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say if you get it in stick form, it's basically going to be pure, but it's definitely going to be more expensive. Also, that's another thing that's really interesting. There are different grades. I didn't look too much into it because there was so many like mini rabbit holes to find out, like fall down with cinnamon. But in Sri Lanka, there's like grades of cinnamon. Like the smaller the cinnamon is, the more tightly rolled it is, the more expensive it is to purchase.
Okay.
So like it's a culture within a culture, like cinnamon itself. It's a beautiful, like, it's amazing, honestly. Like Ceylon cinnamon, just I could fall down like that rabbit hole forever. Like
I love it. Okay, so let's kind of switch gears here now, and I want to challenge you to see how you would use cinnamon in more modern day cooking, in your cooking. Like we all know cinnamon rolls, we all know about the baking and cooking and cakes and all that. But why don't you give us a more unique way of using cinnamon?
one of my favorite things to do with cinnamon. Now I have not tried this with Ceylon cinnamon. I'm referring to cassia, but I will temper the whole cassia sticks in oil to like release their flavor, and then I'll like incorporate it into soups and stocks, and it just gives it this beautiful, warm, earthy flavor. And that's a really big thing in Indian cuisine. They do that a lot of Indian cuisine, and it's beautiful. It creates the most amazing flavor that just kind of like it releases the cinnamon in a way that like it really doesn't with other types of with other processes of like baking it in powder form. And I think it has something to do actually with the essential oils, because you're tempering and like the essential oils, you're warming them up, you're like releasing them. So I feel like that might have something to do with it. And then you're like simmering it to like completely develop and like release all of that flavor. And it's like it's hard to describe, but it's like the flavor of warmth like no other. It's amazing.
I agree. I think, and my logical brain says that when something is ground into a powder, you're kind of killing the extract of the essential oil. Do you still get some? Probably, yeah. But when it's in a powder form, it's going to be harder to get that essential oil. It's the same thing like, when you dry oregano, right? The essential oils are actually being extracted out through evaporation, which is drying it. But like one thing that my grandma always taught me is that whenever I'm putting like oregano into a sauce, you put it in your hand like this and you slap it. And what that does is that breaks the seal on the outside of the leaf and allows the essential oils to come out. And then you put it into your sauce. But you can't do that with a powdered form, right?
Yeah.
So being able to use the entire stick is you're going to get the most purest of flavors. Also, you're going to know what it is. You know what I
True.
mean?
Like
Like
no one's gonna be able to mix in like powders and buffers.
powder forms, yeah, they could put anything in there, any type of
Yeah.
filler in there. So I really like that you said that. One thing I talked about the coffee thing, but one thing I like to also do with it, and this will kind of go back to our porridge thing, is when I'm boiling the water for my porridge, throw a cinnamon stick in there. Throw a couple sticks in there and let the essential oils come out. Make the porridge with the stick in there. I guess most frequently I use it in oatmeal. I like it to flavor the oatmeal, which a lot of people just throw brown sugar in there, but I'm telling you, do like cinnamon and honey in your oatmeal.
Ooh, yeah.
Like you're not going to need brown sugar. A little bit of like a little heavy cream. Let it come together. Throw your oats in there and cook it all at the same time. A lot of people will put the cream in afterwards. But like if we're taking our liquid source and we're bringing it up to temp, putting in our oats and letting the oats soak in the flavors of the cinnamon, the essential oils of that cinnamon, letting the compounds of the what am I thinking? The milk or the dairy product come apart and really come together, and it creates this really harmonious texture, I guess you could say, in flavor. But that's my use for the cinnamon stick, is that I like to, obviously, same as Sarah, use the stick, but it brings a depth of flavor. Ultimately, I think cinnamon is really well used in the depth of flavor. It creates depth. And, you put it like in the mole sauce, you put it in, even apples. When you're baking apples, you dust them in cinnamon, you're going to have a more in magnified flavor. It's very interesting.
It's just like, because like, especially with the sticks, like when you heat something up, when you let it simmer for a long time, you're developing these layers of flavor. The separate ingredients have more time to like heat up and react and fuse together. In my theory, like I haven't like super studied this, but I feel like because when atoms and molecules are heated, they expand, they bounce around, they interact. Like, and I feel like when you heat them for a long time, the molecules like get loose and they attach and they form all new different compounds, and you get such a depth of flavor. But versus just like sprinkling in cinnamon to something and baking it, and it's kind of like almost like you don't get a lot of movement when it comes to like cake batters and stuff like this. But like if you let the flavor really bloom, then you just like you can. I find it so interesting the way you're able to treat some ingredients and get a completely new flavor out of them that you've never tasted before.
Correct. And it's like what you were just saying. You're allowing everything to come apart and then come back together. And when that happens, you're creating a new product. In a negative form of that, and that's kind of what freezing does to things, right? It takes and it inserts it basically takes all the water in something and it expands it. And so then when you defrost it, you have these expanded like fibers and everything. And I think of what you're saying just in that. That's how it kind of draws parallels in my brain, is like when you freeze something, it expands and it loosens those fibers. And so when you're taking like a steak out or something, or if you froze like a muffin, you're gonna have a different texture, because when it defrosts, and those molecules, the water molecules that are in there all melt and evaporate. So it's taking things with them. Yeah. And so when we do it on the other side of things, when we slowly bring things up to temp and we let it simmer, and we're not, going straight from cold to boil, you're allowing that the molecules to really come apart. And then as you start to cool it, they all come back together. And that's how it works in my brain. And I don't know if that ever even made sense to anybody, but to me, that's the beautiful part about, cooking, is that you get to create new flavors with the combination of a multitude of ingredients.
Yeah. I mean, cooking is boundless. There's literally millions of oh my God. It's just, I'm at a loss for words sometimes, because it is just so infinite. And like, all of these historic ingredients also that you can pull from that aren't even a part of the modern day table. Like bringing those back and focusing on them, and just like, because all of this food has a rich evolutionary strand, and some of the ancestors we could still have access to. How would those work when we combine them?
Correct. Correct. Well, yeah. And and this is kind of the last thing I'll say on this, because we're about up at time. And I will say that it is my lifelong goal in this, world of culinary. And when I cook, it is always my goal to stick to minimal ingredients and see how big of flavors I can create. Because one of the things that was really, stamped into my brain when going through school and going through my career and really learning about food is that we can take, 25 ingredients and we can make this beautiful flavored dish. But where the skill comes in is when you can take 3 ingredients and create this boldly flavored dish, or piece of protein or porridge or vegetable or anything like that. And that's why we're talking about cinnamon, is because cinnamon is one of those things that you can take cinnamon, heavy cream, and butter, and you can make something very, very beautiful. But cinnamon is an ingredient that has the components that you don't need 12 other ingredients for, to highlight it. Does that make sense to you?
It completely does. It has so much potential, as we're talking about, we've been talking about the compounds and ground versus whole and all of these different varieties. There's so much you can do with it. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast, but we were talking earlier about how you can buy pure cinnamon essential oil that can be cooked with. There's so much you can do with such a simple ingredient. Correct. And it's boundless. And that's like I said earlier, that's the great thing about food, is every single ingredient, there are endless possibilities with each one.
Right. Yeah, endless possibilities. And don't think just because cinnamon's used in baking that's all we can do with it. I think that a lot of times people will get a little, I don't want to say the word closed-minded, but trapped in their own box of, we can only use these products for this thing. Well, maybe not. Let's try cinnamon in something savory, like you were saying. Put it in a stock, put it in a soup, put it in a sauce, put it in mashed potatoes. I don't know.
That'd be good, actually.
Yeah, experiment. A mashed parsnip, mashed potatoes, a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of ginger. I think that would be pretty darn good.
A bit of molasses, maybe, just on top of something.
Molasses. Right? Oh boy. Yeah, now we're getting into some good stuff. And it's almost, that great holiday of cooking, Thanksgiving. So get out there, experiment, explore. We just took a very small thing and just expanded it to a certain amount. I know we could expand it for about 4 hours if we really wanted to.
Modern century history.
Yeah. So, Sarah, I appreciate you doing all the research on that and all the knowledge that you just brought to this show. That was fantastic. Everybody get out there and vote for Sarah. We need to get her into the top 5, because I believe that's the next journey, or the next part of the journey. And make sure you jump on, vote. Every vote counts, I guess you could say.
Do it for the baked goods. I will make you something with cinnamon.
And please, if you vote for her, make sure you send her that message. Hey, I voted.
Give me something good.
Where's my baked goods? Because I've had her baked goods and they are fantastic. I'm just saying, I ate too many cupcakes that day, so that's all there is to it.
It's a trap.
Yes, it's a trap. I love it. All right, Sarah, thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you for your hard work with this. Everybody, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Adios.
Bye.